Hello everyone, how's it going? I'm Twism Family, and we are back with another episode of, some class discussion, as well as some, maybe some raves and rants. I don't know. We'll see when we'll get there. Maybe we'll hold them. I don't want to sound too rude or anything like that. As always, we have my friend Rob. Rob, say hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How's everything? How was your weekend?
Going well. How about yourself?
Not too bad. I had the last couple of days off, had to take care of some family things. But, okay, first things first. We want to get into this. We're going to talk about the Warrior today. And later on, we're going to talk about the Rogue. But we're going to start it off. Let's see. We're going to show you what we have here is we're going to transition over to our spells and abilities page. And this is something that we have on the Reddit website as well as the YouTube page. And I'll put a description down the link below. As soon as the video's done, you can have access to this. You can view all the classes that we have here, and Rob will update them as more information comes out, and I'll work on it as well. And I just want to first off say that Rob and I, have no affiliation with Visionary Realms or any subsidiaries of the team. We are just fans, just taking our spare time and doing this as a hobby and just putting things out there for you guys. If there's anything that you don't see that you like to see more of, please let us know in the comments. Like, describe, dislike. I like the good with the bad. And so let's get down to it. So we're going to first talk about the Warrior. And I believe in one of the recent videos with Chris Perkins, and the name escapes me, the gentleman that did the interview, but Chris had mentioned that the Warrior may or may not possibly be specifically the tank. It could serve as multiple or another role, and I could be wrong, but that's what I got from the gist of it. So let's go down a few of abilities here. So we have kick, which is you kick your enemy, inflicting physical damage, and that's going to cost you 20 endurance. So something to think about, where in the past MMOs, and Rob, let me know if I'm steering off in the wrong direction here, but if the only comparison I have right now is World of Warcraft's Warrior, where they use rage, correct? And they're going to be expending endurance. It's something that they're going to have to build. And these abilities for the Warrior and Pantheon, they will have to expend the endurance that they've built.
Yeah, that's what I've seen so far myself. Again, the streams, we don't have a full update, but they had an endurance bar that was pre-filled, and they would spend it, whereas like you said, say you had like the Sith Juggernaut in the Old Republic, where they had to generate rage, but then they had abilities to spend rage. So that could change because the Warrior actually hasn't had a class reveal yet.
Right.
We're just going based off of what we've seen in the streams.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So then we have the taunt. Taunt your enemy, forcing them to attack you for 3 seconds and generating hate for that same duration. Now, Rob, you have more knowledge about EQ than myself, and I'm just wondering, how did the Warrior play out in the original EQ? And my question is more geared towards the 3 seconds. Like, that doesn't sound like it's a lot of time. So I don't know if you played a Warrior or a class that actually had to use the taunt ability. How do you feel like that kind of plays in?
Yeah, I never played a Warrior. I did play a Shadow Knight, and Man, they had crazy aggro generation just because they had this line called the voice line, which you could cast it on yourself or others, and it was just like a hate buff. So anything you did, generated more hate.
Yep.
And this kind of seems like a little mini version of that, because previously taunt, kind of like what it did was it just put you at the top of the hate list, and so you could go to the top for just a quick second, because as soon as somebody did something else, like if you had a cleric's heal over time on you and that ticked,
Yep.
that could bump him right back over the top of you. So this one seems like it gives them a little more ability to, because it's forcing them for 3 seconds to attack you, and then during that, when it says generate hate, I'm wondering if it just means anything you do, rather than having to only use a hate building mechanism. So if you're throwing out crazy DPS, for that 3 seconds, you might want to throw out your DPS abilities, or who knows what there will be, maybe.
I wonder if we'll see like an AoE hate, like a hate generation.
Possibly. Again, we're kind of limited right here. Again, we don't have much of a description on Kick, so maybe Kick generates a lot of hate.
Right.
I know in EverQuest, I believe Kick did have a chance to interrupt, but then again, so did pretty much anything like Bash, one-handed weapons that were really quick. Had a chance to interrupt casting. You didn't need an actual ability to do it. You could just potentially, through repeated hits, interrupt somebody's casting. So,
right. Speaking of which, the bash here says where you inflict physical damage, and if your enemy is angry, bash will generate additional hate based on your level. So, I mean, that certainly is a what's the word I'm looking for? It's certainly it's a gray area as far as, because I think what we're going to see is enemies are going to there's angry, like the mobs will be angry, right? So
you wonder if
to get rid of that anger as well.
Well, if you again, we're kind of skipping up, but if you skip up to the level 8, it's angering blow, and it says fiercely strike your enemy, inflicting physical damage. So obviously, like, physical damage is just a descriptor. You could have nature damage, this damage. If you're not super familiar with MMOs, a lot of them use this kind of term, like WoW. People would say white damage. What's your white damage? It basically just means that, like, armor class is going to mitigate this sort of damage. So high armor class will help mitigate. That's the in a sense, the resist you would have to improve in order to decrease how much. So physical damage, and putting them into a state of anger. So it seems like this is something that the tank, the warrior himself, is going to generate. He's going to make the mobs angry. And, again, we're limited, but it seems like that this probably might tie into more abilities over on, because if you're getting a little snippet of what they potentially could be, they might have different states that they could put people in, which could have different effects on different abilities.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we have the Will to Live. Which is it costs 100 endurance as well as 50 mana, which is interesting because even though warriors are not specifically a spell casting class, Visionary Realms has put in the cost of mana and endurance, so maybe the warrior will have some sort of affinity to mana and everything else, where it says, so your will to live strengthens your physical resilience, increasing your health, armor class, and avoidance by a large amount for 8 seconds, with a 2 minute cooldown.
So, your 3-minute cooldown.
Yep. So my bad. 3 minutes.
But yeah, that's kind of like, I think it looks like their panic button in a sense. It seems like a few
Oh
classes have
shit.
panic. Yeah, you have some panic buttons. You know, we talked about the cleric previous stream, but they have a buff they could put on them that increased their healing casting speed, kind of like. So I wonder if you're going to start to see more panic buttons for classes, or this is the one where it's like, oh, we know that the boss is going to have a damage spike right here, so pop this ability. That was common amongst through EverQuest, World of Warcraft. Your tanks would have your defensive abilities that you want to save for certain time period during raid mobs and stuff like that.
Right.
And then kind of going back to the mana thing, they definitely said something in a stream, can't remember which one, but talking about how kind of wanted to kind of break that trend of that, oh, well, this class never uses mana, or the rogue never uses mana, this class never does. But to me, I was just kind of wondering behind it, will they have like a lore tie-in? Because like this one, a lot of their abilities are kind of straightforward. They're just dealing damage, they're doing this, they're doing that. But this one, it almost seems like they're asking for something. You know what I mean? They're asking to be buffed. So it's almost like, I wonder if the mana tie-in could just be that, since they're asking particular deity maybe to bless them, that anything in that sort of way could be mana based. So to me, I think that'd be a pretty cool tie-in for even if a class doesn't use mana, but in a sense acts as like a prayer.
Which is a good point, because I look at it in the other direction of the classes, the Archai, the Dark Mirror, the dwarf, the elf, the halflings, the human, and the scar. They all have an affinity to mana according to the other classes, like clerics, wizards, enchanters, and summoners. So why wouldn't they have, as a warrior, an affinity to mana? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would figure that even in the fantasy realm, if you have access to something that anybody could potentially learn, why wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's I think that's good. It's a different approach. Moving on, we have Shoulder Crash, expending 50 endurance, 3-meter range to instant cast, slam into your enemy, inflicting physical damage. If your enemy has less than 30% health, you will gain the upper hand, increasing your strength by 20% of your overall health for 12 seconds. Now, focusing on you will gain the upper hand, it sounds to me like back in SWTOR, when you played the Imperial Agent, you had a lot of abilities where you'd what were those abilities called, where you'd cast like a heal, and then if it was
it might have been Culto Probe. There was a few of them where, like, if you cast it below this health, it would return one of you, because you had to have these little buffs on you, and I can't remember.
Yeah, they give you like I want to keep saying
advantage. It was like it was like an advantage. I can't remember 100%. I wish I could, but it was such a while ago I played it.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds pretty cool, because upper hand would be in the section of abilities. So
yeah, and it's one of those things again where it seems like I get that, like, there's different states, and it's kind of one of those deals where, again, if it's almost like an execute, if below whatever percent, and then it, to me, again, there's really nothing to theory craft yet, because we don't have any numbers, but I guess you could just theorize that it'd be beneficial to obviously stack health. If you're a tank, you want high health, but if you're going to increase your strength by 20% of your health, then if you have a good amount of health, that's a good chunk of strength that you're going to gain.
Do you think that having gaining the upper hand will be a visual debuff that you'll see, or do you think that it'll just kind of be something that just pops up and is like,
yeah, it's probably one of those deals where I mean, you're just gonna have to pay attention to the mob's health, and that when I doubt. Maybe, again, with modern MMOs, like a lot of times now there's all these visual cues where like,
right.
oh, if you use this ability, it interacts with this ability. And again, I know like, again, you mentioned the Old Republic, but the Old Republic did that a lot where if you had a heal that buffed at this heal, or if you cast this spell and it made this one free, they started giving you visual cues on your icon bar. But again, this seems to be going a little more traditional, so I don't know how much of that hand holding they want to do as far as helping you play the class, whereas you should probably be able to play it yourself, which there's kind of way I would probably lean towards, is that really like with the limited icon bar that you're going to have, you should probably know what abilities you have on there and not really let the game tell you what you should be doing.
Right. Well, I was going to say, it brings up an interesting point that I think a lot of MMOs in the past, they're geared more towards, watching your keys versus watching what's going on in the fight, So I think that's going to be, a deciding factor. Will Visionary Realms stick with, we want everyone to clearly know their class, but we want to have visual cues, like you're saying, and not be looking at, okay, I'm going to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in some sort of rotation and take their eyes off of what's going on in the battle.
Yeah, which kind of think there's a reason why they have like, even in the streams now, like a lot of the health is above the mob, or the little debuffs are above the mob, so it kind of helps you, like you said, focus where crowd control is going to matter. You're going to want to pay attention to what's going on the screen and not, like you said, stare out that icon bar. And again, you're not going to have as many to look at, so you should hopefully be able to focus.
Yeah. All right. So we have, like you mentioned earlier, Angering Blow. Fiercely strike your enemy, inflicting physical damage and putting them into a state of anger for 12 seconds, which ties back into Bash. Then we have Strike of Breaking. Cost 40 endurance, 3 meter range, insta-cast. Find a weakness in your enemy's defenses and exploit it. Inflicts physical damage, reduces enemy AC, and generates hate every second for 12 seconds. It requires enemy to be angry. And again, earlier what we were talking about as far as having visual cues in certain levels of I don't even know what you want to call them, debuffery or whatnot, but you somehow there's got to be an indication that your mob is angry. Not necessarily you're not necessarily you've grabbed all the aggro from them, but some type of indication that they're angry.
Yeah, you could, I could see like maybe they put like a little debuff.
Red.
Well, yeah. I don't know if they'll do that, but probably more maybe like an icon, like we've seen the DOTs from the rogues go up. There's like a little icon, or cranial pressure, the DOT from the Enchanter. That had like a little icon. Maybe we'll see like a little angry face on there. Meaning that the mob is angry. But again, it's interesting. You can see like it's tying in again. Like you have. I think it's kind of always interesting when you get an ability at level 1 that references something you don't have yet, because it's like you're like, ooh, I wonder what that is. When am I going to get that? And
you're able to use your abilities, because we talked about, well, not that we talked about it earlier offline, and I know that it's kind of spreading through the forums where, we don't, as you get higher in level, their higher level abilities will replace the lower level ones. And I think that, between level 1 and level 10 currently, you're going to be able to play with a span of abilities that tie in together, so that you might be playing with a level 20 ability and you're still pressing that level 1 bash to tie in, to something else, so.
Yeah, which was common in EverQuest. You would get these abilities because it's a little different because there wasn't the warrior didn't have like a spell book. They didn't have a casting UI. Kick, taunt, bash were actually little abilities you manually had to click.
Yeah.
And once you got kick, again, you used it all the way up. And they've kind of made mention to that there are going to be, in a sense, permanent abilities, which you could see kick, taunt, bash as being permanent abilities, whereas you might have abilities that they don't get stronger in the sense of you get it at level 5, and then when at level 10, that damage goes up. You might just have, instead of angering blow, you might have, infuriating blow, which is in itself a whole new spell, but
Right.
actually just an upgrade for angering blow, which, there was very common in EverQuest where Shadow Knights and Necromancers had the darkness line. It was like, cascading darkness, devouring darkness, so it was all the same.
Yeah.
Roughly the same effect. It was a DOT with the snare, but it was just different names for abilities that you would eventually clock up your spell book.
Right. Just wanted to quickly touch on, I'm really interested in this whole, giving warriors mana and everything. It'd be nice to have like a visual effect where like you said, maybe they'll do a blessing. The warrior has to get on his knees, and an altar appears with a bright light, rays of light, and they're praying to their deity, and grant them the use of mana. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't know how, that would probably have to be an out of combat sort of thing, because
Yeah,
I don't know how much they want to, because you got to figure too that thing that ties into making these games, as much as the animations look cool,
Right.
a lot of times they have an effect that oh, I'm casting this ability, but since the animation actually takes 2 seconds, even though it's a 3-second cast time, it's actually 5 seconds until I can do more damage.
Right.
So you don't want to have too over an elaborate of an animation, because that all ties in. Again, there was a lot of just even saying one thing that, again, I'm not that great of a gamer when it comes to playing things like Battlefront and such, but I know in Battlefront 2 people talked about how some of the lightsaber action, the animation was just causing them to not be able to click another swing.
Right,
I don't know if it was Yoda or somebody, but again, so you don't want to have people saying, I'm not playing this class because the animations limit me.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, I guess especially when it came to mages and things like that, they want to be able to have some type of cancel to get out of the animation.
yeah, usually again, as people just jumped, you'd hit the space bar.
Right. So we have the next one here, Pity the Weak. A 90 endurance cost. It's a defensive ability. 12-meter range insta-cast with a 2-minute cooldown. Rescue a friendly target, transferring all of their current hate to yourself. And that's another oh shit button, for somebody else.
yeah. It's funny when I saw that, the first thing that came to my mind is that so many times in original EverQuest where it's okay, I'm gonna break Mez now, and the enchanter would just back up because he knew it didn't matter how many times you hit taunt on him. For some reason, as soon as the mob got broken, he's just gonna turn around and run at him.
Right.
So I could see this button being okay, I'm gonna break Mez, and then instantly pressing that, or if your cleric gets a little heal happy, and then the boss decides to go at him, you hit that button. I like the fact that it's like transfers all their hate. It's not just put you at the top. It really allows you to control 20%. The mob. Yeah, it's because you can hit that button and then chain a lot of these angering abilities together to probably like rapidly pile on the hate. And that's just something I think people are going to have to get used to, is that I remember EverQuest, it was like when the tank went in, it's like, don't heal me until this point.
Yes.
DPS don't go in until this point. You couldn't just all jump in at once. You had to wait for the tanks to generate a little hate.
And let's talk about that, man, because I think that, we got to let the young people know, you can't just run in there.
No Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, you gotta listen to your healer. Listen to your healer and your tank.
Yep.
It's so true. Listen, I'm not knocking on it. Today's MMOs are great. I'm joking around when I say for the young people to not just rush in and whatnot, but I'm just trying to let everybody know that when they if you weren't around with the original EQ, I came around in EverQuest Adventures Online through Sony PlayStation, and that's how it was for a lot of the older games. Your tank and your healer were essentially partners in letting the group know what was going on. In either your DPS, your crowd control, they all referred to one or the other, and basically the tank. And it was nice because MMOs today, it's in my opinion, I don't want to generalize, but in my opinion, it's nearly left up to the tank most of the 90% of the time to know the fight. And I think here we're going back to, granted, yes, on some small scale, everyone should know the fight. However, taking it back, I think Pantheon is relieving some of that pressure, and the tank and the healer, collaboratively will know the fight. And as you said, especially with this, pity of the week, transferring all their hate, that's essentially, that is your oh shit button for a party member. And I said earlier that, you mentioned that it takes all their hate, and then you further mentioned that with a chaining of these other abilities, I'd be okay to lessen that down and say transfer 20% of their hate and then tie in a taunt, a bash, angering blow, you know what I mean, to generate the rest of that hate. Rather than just say this ability is gonna take all of its hate, even with its 2-minute cooldown.
Yeah, you could see some of this stuff just obviously getting tweaked as it goes along. We could see even from, the rogue abilities we saw like 2 streams ago have already been changed from what was released on the Pantheon actual website. So you can tell that a lot of tweaks are going on, and then again there could be little different versions of the game going on, because I can remember when we were doing finger quotes beta for the Star Wars The Old Republic, was basically just kind of everybody got to come in and play. But they did have actual beta testers, but then there was also the friends and family server that they would talk about, where they were like a build or 2 ahead of them. So again, the developers could be playing on their own server, and the pre-alpha testers could be a build or 2 behind. Who knows? Again, we don't really know, because we want to preface that as Tom mentioned, we're not affiliated with anybody. We're not in the pre-alpha, so we're not leaking information that we shouldn't be. This is all just stuff we picked up from watching streams.
A lot of work.
And our kind of generalization of tying things into other games. So, it's just like you said, we're just fans, just trying to provide some content for people out there.
Yep, yep. So, all right. So I want to pause here, and we talked offline, and I'd like to approach this in a positive way, and just start off by saying, I personally, I read through a lot of the forums, between here and there. I'm at work or my personal time, and I value everyone's opinion. I don't get angry when someone posts something outrageous or whatnot, and I just want to make mention that the game is still in pre-alpha. A lot of the small things such as the graphics, content, the way the characters look, it's in pre-alpha. It could go either way. I think the game looks great the way that it is. Rob and I, 2 years ago, we met Brad in Boston at PAX East, and the game looked great then too. And you can, if you go back in to all the other streams, and you can see the progression that the game has taken going forward. I can only assume the game probably won't be launched for another 2 years, and I have slowly accepted that. as much as it's painstaking to admit that, because I want it now. I think, as I said to Rob earlier, I'm an MMO whore right now. I'm just downloading MMOs and uninstalling them because I'm just so bored. I know that there are some people who feel the same way. There are others that can stick to one or two games and be content. I'm personally I'm missing something. Rob and I have talked about taking out some vacation time when the game first launches for a few days. That's something that we want to do personally because we love the game and we love the way the direction is going. One thing, Rob, do you mind explaining going into some of the PvP rule sets in old EQ, how that works?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we can see how that might work in Pantheon if they decide to have the same rule sets for the shards.
Yeah, that's not. I know they had mentioned they do want to have a PvP shard. I do want to kind of tie in with your previous thing, talking about, again, a lot of this stuff is pre-alpha, so a lot of things are subject to change. In the streams, they've said numerous times that they know that there's a lot of things that people want polished, but they're kind of focusing on, making the gameplay fun and having balanced classes. Because if you don't have that, you could run into, what happened unfortunately with Vanguard. You release a rushed product that was buggy with this, it's that. It's again, offline, I kind of made the reference to Tommy Boy, with the scene where the guy wants a guarantee on the box. So kind of similar, where you can mark it guaranteed, but you still have crap in the box. So it's if your gameplay is crap and your balance is crap, but it looks really shiny and pretty, you just have shiny, pretty crap.
Right.
Which when it comes down to it, I'd for me, if I had to pick or choose a game that was fun and balanced but didn't look that great versus a game that looks great and is horrible, I'd rather play the game that's fun. As much as I really want shiny, pretty graphics,
right.
I can go back and play the original EQ, and I mean original EQ with the original models with the fat stumpy trolls. That's fine to me. I don't need that. But again, I know to each their own. Some people like the shininess of it. Otherwise, graphics would never advance. People would just be happy.
Right.
But I have to agree with what the direction that they're taking. That again, I'd rather have it be fun, and then work on the animations and the polish after. Again, I have no clue how any of that works, but to me it seems like making something look pretty would be easier than making something fun. So
Yep.
I have faith in it. I would just let it work its way out. And again, that's kind of the blessing and the burden of the information age, is that you hear about a game from the creation of the idea. And that's not just video games. I like board games as well. And now with this and that and Kickstarter and this and that, you hear about these games and it's, well, now I have to wait 2 years to get that board game.
Exactly.
So it's kind of the like I said, the blessing and the burden of knowing so much information so quickly is that you can burn yourself out. Again, we made some videos 2 or 3 years ago, and we kind of just put it on hold because you can only talk about theories for so long until you get content, and then you're just burning yourself out and you're burning out your viewers of, hey, you're just rehashing the same thing. So, now that we have some content, we like to discuss it. But wrapping back to the server talk, again, I played EverQuest, and when I played EverQuest, I got introduced to it from a friend, and he introduced me in the form of PvP because he said that's the only way to play the game, which is, kind of how I eventually got ingrained into it. Even when I went to World of Warcraft, it wasn't exactly the same, but I still played on a PvP server. When you and I started playing the Old Republic, we played on a PvP server. It's just kind of like how I like to have fun. Hopefully the PvP in this game goes more back to the EverQuest PvP, where it wasn't like, oh, you have to enter a particular zone. If you control this zone, you can't be attacked. But again, with EverQuest, there was 4 servers named after kind of the gods and tactics in this. So there's Ralosek, Talonzek, Sullenzek, and Valentzek. 2 of them, Talon and Valen, if you knew the lore, were twins, had the same exact server rule set. I played on Valentzek, so that was a PvP teams. There was 4 teams. Not going to break down all of them, but really what it ended up breaking down to on Valentzek was one team being like Dark Elves, the evil guys, against all the good guys. And then eventually everybody cross-teamed. So, but again, that rule set had, and when it first started, it was team-based, and you could, when you killed somebody, you could take 1 item from their body and all the money they were carrying. So wow. A big thing is when you were losing, man, you got quick at bagging stuff. Because anything that was in a bag, they couldn't take. So all of a sudden, you'd be killing somebody, and it'd be funny because you would start to see their items coming off their body because you knew they were, and you would obviously start like, what's the most expensive thing that I don't want to lose comparative to the cheap thing? It's like, here, have this little ring. Eventually, that got changed to coin loot only, and even within that, it had a level swing. They said it was 8 levels. So what it meant was you could attack, again, I believe it was 8, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But it was, if I was level 35, I could attack up to level 39 or down to level 31. So it was kind of important when you were playing with friends to roughly stay in the same level, because say you and I are playing together and I'm level 36, but you're level 35 and a level 40 attacked me, it meant you couldn't help me.
Right.
But then again, it also did, because if you were a healer, you could keep healing me, and man, did people hate that, because they thought it was not fair because they couldn't attack you, but you could keep me alive, which sometimes, if you wanted to have a legitimate fight, you would tell your buddy, just don't heal me. Again, so Valentzek, Talonsek had that same rule set. Ralosek was just a crazy free-for-all. I tried playing on that for a bit, and it was just too hardcore.
Wow.
At any level, could attack anybody, meaning like if you were a troll starting in Grob at level 1, a level 50 could just come by and he was like, crack, you're dead.
Oh man.
Crack, you're dead. So it wasn't team based. It was, like I said, it was a free fall. It was every man for himself. So that really relied on, hopefully you had a guild.
Right.
So, and then the last one was Sullenzek, and that was deity based. So it didn't matter whether you were a dark elf, wood elf, or this elf. If you all worshipped the same gods, you were on the same team. And then I didn't play on it, but I knew there was a little thing with a map that you could go check the website about what team owned what zone and all that sort of stuff. That also had no level limit on kills. You could loot coins on it, but it also had no rules, meaning that you couldn't petition a GM for anything. Somebody could train you to their heart's content. They could corpse camp you all day long.
Oh man.
Again, eventually the servers merged into one big server on Zek, and I just remember Sullen Zek talking about how they had this bard that was so good at PvP. I'm not going to name names because, again, it's all these things, but I just remember they had this bard that was so good at PvP. But him being good at PvP consisted of using Bard Song and training mobs on people. But once that merged, you couldn't do that anymore. So a lot of the other people on servers that were good at PvP end up kind of, to me, showing those people what good PvP actually was. Actual skill when you're killing somebody one-on-one, not using a mob to get somebody down to 1% health and then hitting him. But that's stories for other days. I'm willing to bet a lot of other people have other similar stories about that sort of stuff. But to me, again, that's the thing about Pantheon that I'm hoping that it'll bring back is, have these stories that you remember particular names. For me, I can remember one paladin named Kalile, and I remember him because he's the one that won the tournament that they had before they merged the servers. So he was Kalile, champion of Valenzek.
Oh wow.
And that guy was good at PvP.
Yeah.
So you remember people. You remember people for their ability. You remember people their skill at potentially playing a class. Again, before the servers merged and before the cross-teaming thing was a thing, when you played the Dark Elf team, the Troll, they called themselves Darkies. So on the Darkies, if there was a particular person that was cross-teaming, you knew who that was, and you're like, nobody groups with him. He was basically shunned, and that was the community aspect. Yeah, you had an actual community aspect that hopefully this game will bring back.
Nice. I like the fact, the community will police themselves.
Yeah, that was definitely a thing too. Was that there was definitely a lot of community policing, and if you lost in PvP, man, you lost in PvP. But sometimes it was like, hey, some guy jumped me. It was a bunch of this, a bunch of that. So you might call in some of your guild mates, and that was a big thing. People kind of looked out for each other. If you were getting ganked or this or that, or somebody was just, again, PvP, you kind of go into knowing what you're going to get. But I'm also kind of the person where that if I'm on a PvP server and I run up to you and I kill you, and it was fair and square, that's it. That's the end of it. I might send you a tell. Hey, good fight, blah, 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 blah. Or you say you come back and you attack me, and then you win. That I might maybe try to fight you one more time, best out of 3.
Right.
But once somebody's beaten me, or I beat them, that's kind of the end of it.
Yeah,
I'm not looking
away.
to ruin. I'm not looking to ruin somebody's thing, and I'm, maybe
hunt them out.
Yeah, you say, hey, sorry, man, I killed you, but I'm taking your camp. It's kind of like to the victor goes the spoils, and hopefully they can respect that. But that's kind of the thing is, again, you kind of police yourself. Whereas if I'm going to continually come in and just ruin your day, then hopefully you have a guild that will come and beat me up and force me to leave you alone.
Right. Leave me something for when I respawn.
Yeah, again, but hopefully we'll see what they have. And again, I know in previous things they've talked about what their plan is for like corpse camping, this and that, and they were saying that obviously they'll have GM things, but they were saying that hopefully the community will help police that thing as well. Which again, I do hope people kind of try to take it seriously, and and again, some people that is fun. Ruining your day is fun. It is what it is, and hopefully, you have enough friends online to help
my
negate
boss ruined
that.
my day, so I'm going to ruin yours.
yeah, but hopefully, you have a good community, you know what I mean, and the people that want to just have a good time out with those people.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to move into the next segment, and we're going to talk about the Rogue. And let's see here. We have, where am I? Here we go. The Rogue. So I'm just going to read this little description. In the shifting sands of the fragile era, rogues are sought out for the faceless affairs of nations. Yet their allegiance is rarely to a banner or creed, but to themselves. With daggers drawn, the treacherous rogue is a ruinous force, unraveling their enemies with terrifying speed and efficiency. As melee specialists, rogues have trained extensively with one-handed weapons, but are most deadly with a dagger in their main hand, plunged deep into the back of their enemy. While exceptionally skilled with dagger and blade, rogues avoid combat unless it is on their terms. Masters of subterfuge, they plot their move from the shadows to avoid detection. They will find an opening of opportunity, or rely on their alchemical talents to create one themselves. When the moment arrives, there are few on Terminus who can match the deadly precision of a rogue's onslaught, and fewer still who can disappear in the wake of such carnage as if they were never there. That sounds awesome. I'm hooked. It sounds like a little movie. I'm hooked. All right, so first ability, a level 4 skill. And again, these are just abilities that Rob and I have taken from the streams that have gone on previously. These abilities will most definitely subject to change. And so we just want to share with you what we have. You can also find this information on the, I don't know if it's official, but there's definitely a Pantheon wiki page. Where you can find similar information. But we just wanted to put this out there for fun, and because we love the game and we like doing this kind of thing. And so we just wanted to share with you. So we have our first ability here at Hide, a self skill. Become invisible to living, non-magical targets. Any movement or action will cancel the effect. It requires cover. So, interesting enough, cover, it sounds like, number one, you got to be out of combat. And secondly, when they say cover, I'm just wondering, do you have to be out of sight from area NPCs? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because that description, a lot of these descriptions, because the rogue had more of a big release, they had the small release, which you can still see in the cleric and shaman, but the rogue had kind of an updated release with ranger and monk. But I took that description straight from them. The level comes from what we've seen in the streams. But yeah, that requires cover is kind of interesting. Again, I'm familiar with Hide from EverQuest, where, rogues had it, but like dark elves had it just as a natural ability,
right,
but only up they could only, like, their skill could only go up to 40 in it or something like that,
Yeah.
which just meant you could hide anywhere, you know. But yeah, the fact that, like, it requires cover is that you have to be, like, behind a tree or by a rock or in a bush,
Yeah.
you know, which is kind of interesting because again, I don't really know the function of it. Could it just be one of those abilities that's just kind of in there for flavor, which I know some people don't like those. I do like them. Again, like, I remember the Magician and EverQuest had a lot of funny abilities. It's like, I turned into a table, you know, because it was, you know, they were just there for fun, and especially a lot of the, I didn't play on any role-playing servers, but, you know, I could see these things, you know, being sort of playing type abilities, like, yeah, oh, I'm a rogue hiding in the bush and I'm going to jump out and steal your galleons or your coin or whatever they're going to use for their currency in this system. But, you know, it kind of goes back to the whole cut purse sort of thing. But again, it could also tie into abilities later. They might have an ability that allows them to make hide cancel, you know, that movement impairment. They might be able to hide, but again, they already kind of have some abilities that do that. But again, the interesting thing is the whole living non-magical, you know, which kind of just means, you know, normal mobs. Again, the rogue and EverQuest had the hide and sneak. They'd have to hit hide first and then sneak. I'm wondering if that's going to tie in together. They can hide and then sneak because it enables silent movement. So, and again, the kind of must be behind. Reading the next ability. Don't mean to steal that from you, but that's level 6. So they could be. You have to do one, then the other. Why not? You know. But we'd have to see.
Which ties right into the next one, pilfer, where you're able to steal an item from your target without them noticing you. It requires sneak. So, like, those first 3 abilities right there chain together, you know. So yeah,
it's kind of, again, I like how the fact that some abilities rely on other and a lot quest, and, you know, again, just even modern MMOs you still have that. But I do like when things tie together, not necessarily in a sense of a combo system.
Yes.
But, you know, you could see too potentially later that will they get improved versions of this that, you know, maybe because undead mobs used to be able to see through Viz lots of times, and no matter what it was in EverQuest, you might have, you know, an enchanter or whatever class cast an invisibility on you, but undead things could see through invis, whereas like necromancers and shadow knight had an invis versus the undead ability. So, you know, shadow knights and necromancers were kind of sweet because they had like gather shadows so they could go invisible. Then they also had invis versus the undead, so they could kind of get past a lot of things, especially the shadow knight. Well, even the necro, because they had feign death. So it's like, oh, just go invisible, feign death. You know, they even had. Were
there any mobs that could see through all of that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure like most like raid mobs would see through a bunch of them, so you couldn't gimmick your way through everything. There was a pre-nerf item, Circlet of Shadow. I believe it was Circlet of Shadow, because I believe it became Circlet of Shadows, which it was a clicky. And I don't think you had to put it on. When I say clicky, it was an ability that you could click and it would give you something. For people that may not be familiar with that term, but they had the Circlet of Shadow where, again, I can't remember if you had to put it on. I think you could just have it in your inventory and you would click it, and it had basically a 0.1 second cast. So if you were a Shadow Knight or a Necromancer that had one of those, you could feign death, and as you were standing up, instantly click it, and you would go invisible. And a mob wouldn't notice it, so you could use it to bypass a lot of stuff. Which, again, I know they talked about it in Pantheon, where they're trying to get rid of some of that stuff to be able to bypass things, because, again, you could bypass certain things in dungeons because you'd say, okay, I'm just going to have the Shadow Knight, you know, grab all these mobs, pull them in one direction, and then your group would walk past, and then he would just feign death, stand up, go invis, and then catch up to the group. So again, to me, I don't. You know, I'm kind of.
That's not strategy.
Well, it is. It is. That's a good tactic. That's knowing what you can do in the game. So I'm kind of like, torn on that because I'm like, man, if somebody just has enough skill to be able to do that, shouldn't you kind of be able to reward that person's skill and ability?
I don't know. It sounds like an exploit to me.
Well, again, it was something that they didn't take out of the game, so it was there, and they were limited. And if somebody destroyed it, it was even more, got that. So again, but just because somebody's feigned death allows them to bypass a group of mobs, to me, that's kind of like you utilizing somebody's skills. But getting off on a tangent, we'll go back to the rogue.
No there. Okay, so we have Shadow Walk, a 20 endurance cost and 2 mana per second. 2 mana per 2 seconds, I'm sorry. 26 meter range. Rogues have carefully honed their craft of sneaking around and hiding in the shadows. But rogues who have learned to shadow walk have developed the ability to seemingly bring the shadows with them, remaining unseen while moving. While active, you're invisible to living, non-magical targets and can move around freely at reduced speed. Consumes mana over time. Thank you for that correction, Shadows.
I saw that. I was like, second.
Somebody on Reddit's going to send me a message like, you forgot the W in Shadows? Okay, so I know we have a lot of abilities to go through, but that sounds interesting, and I just want to quickly say, it says, while active, you're invisible to living, non-magical targets, and can move around freely at reduced speed. So I've seen this in other games, none that I can come off at the top of my head, but what I would like to quickly say is this. When an ability like that, where while it's active you're invisible to living non-magical targets, more often than not you are around NPCs who are non-magical targets. So when there never tends to be a mix of non-magical targets and magical targets in the same area where you're either questing or grinding, where that ability can't be used. And I'm just wondering if there will be in Pantheon where if someone tried to use this ability, they would, again, as we talked about earlier with skill, you have to notice that, that's a magical NPC. I can't use this ability. You know what I'm saying?
I would have to say yes, because in EverQuest there was a mix of everything in zones. The zones had, like I said, to me, my first thought is undead. There were zones where there was living and undead, and the undead would see right through this.
Right.
So I think, in a sense, this ties into the next thing where it was Shadow Dwell. Folks can evolve their Shadow Walk ability into Shadow Dwell, achieving a near supernatural degree of stealth, which does not require mana to sustain. Again, this was just mentioned by Chris Perkins in the MMORPG interview that they did, where some abilities will evolve. And from the way he made it sound, is like, this may not necessarily be something that every person's going to get, but the person that puts the time and an effort, who knows, this could be an epic spell quest, or finding a particularly hard to find trainer that you could upgrade this ability. And this might not be final. Maybe Shadow Dwell, because rogues eventually did get an EverQuest through alternate advancement, just a catch-all, just invisible. They could go invis to everything. So maybe eventually this turns into that. And again, to me, kind of like the mana aspect, I could kind of just mentally wise talk about, like, okay, when they're doing Shadow Walk, they're still kind of relying on like a deity, please help hide me. Whereas Shadow Dwell, they get to the point where it's like, I'm so good at this, I don't need a god anymore. So now I don't need their blessing, so I don't need to use mana. That's just kind of me, how I mentally. Hopefully they do tie it in some that way, because to me that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds cool. Okay, so From there, we have trap works. Through tedious and often painful trial and error, rogues have become adept at detecting and disarming mechanical traps. I think that's pretty cool. Some traps laid out as you're going through the dungeon. You might have. So, I think this directly affects the perception system, where you're able to detect traps. You also, I mean, it only makes sense by definition. You'd have to be perceptive to actually detect those traps. So, maybe so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if this ties in because they have mentioned that there's going to be different specializations within the perception system. So I wonder if this is going to be one of those forms where maybe they talked about through the perception system, you might be able to detect a mob's disposition. So maybe that's like a combat orientated thing. Again, I don't want to go into too much theorizing because we don't really know, and everybody's guess is as good as mine.
Right.
But potentially it could just be like, oh, you're combat focused. You'll be able to see traps. You'll be able to see dispositions. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a cool way, like you said, to tie into the perception system because before and EverQuest they had disarmed traps, but man, they weren't really used that much. There might be one couple areas where you go, and they were just minor annoyances, not so much like, oh, this trap's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
So hopefully they kind of expand on that. But at the same time, you also don't. They might not want to create an area where it's like, I think they've said this before, where they don't necessarily want to block people off because they didn't have a particular class. You don't want to have to go to a dungeon and be like, well, we can only go this far because we didn't bring the rogue.
Right.
So hopefully that if they do have traps, there are more than one way to get through them that doesn't necessarily, maybe you're going to take 50% of your health, but then you just heal afterwards, you know?
Right. Okay. Let's see. We have Poisoncraft. Poisoncraft is a cornerstone of the rogue's repertoire. Throughout their career, rogues will develop an ever-growing proficiency in creating, applying, and neutralizing poisons of greater variety and potency. I think that's a given for a rogue.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Yep. Again, a lot of the classic rogue things, EverQuest, they were the only ones that could craft poisons. So yeah, you played an MMO or tabletop sort of games, you know that rogues like poisons.
Yep. So I like this next one. I've not seen this before, ever in an MMO. Length of rope. Let down a length of rope which your group members can climb, and that is genius to help other members of your team to climb in certain areas of dungeons or even out in the open PvE areas where you have to have the ability to climb, because they have mentioned earlier in the streams that there is a level to climbing. There will be a level of difficulty, and if you don't raise that, you're not going to be able to get to the highest points. So this is something that rogues can automatically. They'll probably throw in an affinity to that and be able to increase their level of degree in climbing higher than other classes, which will definitely, with this ability, length of rope, help other members. So
yeah, either that or I see them just starting maybe a buff. Again, it's true. Like buff, not like a buff in the sense of a buff that you cast, but they might start at a skill level 25, whereas you start at skill level 0. And then again, I've seen somebody post, I think it was on Reddit, where somebody's like, oh man, this is great because I have a friend that is just horrible at doing all the platforming jumps.
Yeah.
So hopefully, this will help with some of the people in groups that are just like, man, I just can't jump. I can't climb.
That's funny.
And they'll just be frustrated. So hopefully this might alleviate some of those.
Come on, guys. You haven't played the original Donkey Kong or, Super Mario Brothers? You gotta time those jumps.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we have the Blackjack Kick, which we saw something similar on the Warrior. A swift kick that gives you leverage, increasing your attack speed for a short time. And I think that we're going to start seeing some abilities chaining together here. Going into Waylay, 50 endurance, offensive, instacast, cross-strike your enemy with both weapons at once, inflicting high damage. Leaking wound, inflict your enemy with a bleeding wound, causing damage over time and making them more vulnerable to physical damage. And I'm basically seeing, I would say that those chaining abilities here, a lot of these melee abilities are instacast, with varying cooldown segments, but they're all instacast. And Rob, if you want to talk real quick about how the rogue's endurance will work.
Yeah, sure. Rogue's endurance, from what we've heard in streams, is that they're going to have like a pool of 100, and it's going to be a set pool. You're not going to have items that increase your endurance. They have talked about potentially having buffs that, increase your endurance regeneration, or potentially have endurance heals. If you played the Old Republic, it's kind of similar to the energy system that the Imperial Agent used. You had a set limit, and it was kind of interesting too that if you were above a certain percent, it actually regenerated quicker. So it was like a kind of a 3-tier group. If you went all the way down to like 0 energy until you got up to like 33%, it regened even slower. And then at 33 to 66, it regened a little faster. So there was always a game of balancing how much endurance you want to use versus you don't ever want to be full, but you don't want to go empty. So be interesting to see if rogues eventually get maybe an alchemic ability that just generates endurance for them, so that you can have that, that panic button. You know what I mean? Again, to be like, go down, you're just going to burst everything down and then hit that and burst it down again. Because we've seen in the streams that you can't just continually mash buttons. You're going to run out of endurance. Right. So, reading through this kind of first few abilities, it kind of seems like the only one you kind of want to make sure that is up is Blackjack Kick, because that just increases your attack speed. So attack speed obviously equates to DPS. It seems like the only one you want to really make sure you have up almost at all times, and everything else you want to kind of intersperse,
Yep.
Again, this will be for theory crafters. I'm not in the slightest, but eventually, fortunately, every game comes down to this is the best way you want to do things. Hopefully they can kind of mitigate that. Going back to a 6-person party, I think, kind of helps, because again, even in EverQuest, if you had a good tank, a good healer, and like maybe a good crowd control or a good this or good that, you could carry a lot of people, which I used to have no problem with. And eventually everything got whittled down to everybody had to be the best at everything or don't want you. Yep. And hopefully, back to some of that where it's like, hey man, this guy, he may not be the greatest, but I like him. He's a good guy. We don't have to have him best. You bring him along anyways. Right. Right. So again, hopefully it doesn't lead to like you have to use this ability and then this ability and that ability, then that ability. And again, some of these, you might use Leaking Wound because you have a particular mob that might have high armor class. So you use that one to make him more vulnerable to physical damage. But then you'd say, okay, well, this other mob, it doesn't really matter. His AC is so low, but his poison resistance is so high. So I'm not going to use. I'm just going to use Toxic Wound, which makes him more vulnerable to poison damage. So hopefully that you're going to have to plan some of your abilities more according to the mobs and not just have a set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 6. Sort of. I could sit here and program my keyboard and do it for me while I just sit there and watch.
Right.
Right.
All right. We have here next, we have Veiled Strike. Striking your enemy's eyes with a hidden blade, reducing their hate towards you by twice the amount of damage this ability inflicts. The amount of hate reduced can increase beyond this amount based on your dexterity. Interesting. So, it looks like there's like a game of balance between your dexterity and, say, your agility. Because doesn't your agility is what's going to allow you... Is that agility or dexterity that's going to allow you to crit and hit more often?
I thought it was... well, I guess I'd say it would depend, because I remember in EverQuest certain classes relied on certain things. Yeah. Like spellcasters, if intelligent based, it was based off your intelligence. If you were like a cleric, it was wisdom based. But rogues in EverQuest were traditionally dexterity based. Agility, I believe, affect like your range weapons, so it was good for like a ranger. But it was also affected dodge, so agility was like a dodge thing. Dexterity also increased your ability to proc off of weapons. So again, I'm just assuming, again, a lot of EverQuest tie-ins that a rogue's going to be dexterity based.
Right.
That's probably all you're gonna really focus on. Maybe not all, but a good amount of your things are going to be dexterity. Right. And again, you can see based off your dexterity. So, it's another one of those things that ties into a particular stat, like the warrior tied into their health. So you can see the warrior being like a health strength. And I'm not sure which is which in this game, because EverQuest didn't have constitution. It had stamina. Stamina equated to hit points.
Yep.
So I could see, again, whatever the tank is, whatever that hit point ability, stat is going to be, you're probably going to want to crank into that. Your tanks usually lots of time hit points are king. Your strength is nice. You get some DPS in there, but again, that's not really your role. As long as you're keeping the mob off of everybody else and being that meat shield, it doesn't matter how much damage you do, as long as you're holding aggro.
Well, I think the big reason why this particular skill is interesting, because, so for example, if, like you say, the rogues here, the main stat would be dexterity, and they are basically critting for high damage, and then this ability Veiled Strike comes in, it reduces the mob's hate towards the rogue by twice the amount of the damage that the ability inflicts. And then the hate is reduced. The amount of hate can be reduced. The amount of hate reduced can increase beyond the amount based on your dexterity. So it's almost like every 24 seconds, the rogue is going to have to hit this ability, because at the same time that they're building the hate, they're getting rid of it and then building it back up very quickly.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to, like you said, the old style of game where you had to know when you could jump in, or how much ability you could just, how much hate your abilities were generating. And again, EverQuest, that was trial and error. There was no threat meters or anything like that. You just kind of had to know.
Well, the only visual right now is like there is like your screen will turn red on towards the outside borders, and there is an audible that you've...
Well, yeah, that's once you take aggro.
Okay.
That's not necessarily when you're gaining hate. That's when the mob is... So again, you're not going to know, like, if the tank has... Where am I on the table?
Yeah.
Am I just below? So this is... I don't know if you're going to be using it literally every 24 seconds, but it's more of the ability that you could probably just sprinkle in there every once in a while.
Yeah.
And again, kind of tying into your dexterity, it's kind of like... It is that thing that it helps to mitigate, like, if you're a high dexterity class, because that's what the rogue did. The rogue kind of relied on their crits, because they weren't going to throw out damage, because they're traditionally the daggers and the one-handed weapons were fast, weak hitting weapons, but they just peppered you so quickly, and it was the crits that would slowly eat you up. So it's nice to see that they're using a stat that you want to stack to help you, which also hurts you because of those crits go crazy, and all of a sudden you're going to get a lot of hate. But again, it's kind of helping mitigate what's going on.
Yep, absolutely. All right, our next ability is Backstab. Another insta-cast. Plunge your dagger deep into your enemy's back, inflicting very high damage. You must be behind your target. requires a dagger in your main hand. So I'm assuming, traditionally 2 daggers in the hand, or a dagger in your main hand and a sword in your right hand, or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, this is pretty much a straightforward. Everybody knows rogues have backstab.
Yeah,
it's not it'd be more of a surprise if it wasn't in game.
Right.
But
right.
yeah, again,
You'd be like, where's my backstab?
Yeah. Well, again, sometimes too, it'd be interesting to see is that, like you said, that you have to have a dagger, and I knew certain rogues in EverQuest that, they might have had a one-handed sword that was way better for DPS, but they got really good at swapping out. Okay, backstab's up. Switch my weapon real quick. Hit that one ability, and then go right back to the other.
Yep.
Yeah. Because that's just how they chose to play. They didn't want to keep that one dagger because, we don't know how it's going to be in this game, but, EverQuest gearing up wasn't exactly easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't, it wasn't a quest game. You weren't questing. It wasn't like the Old Republic where you're just nonstop getting gear like crazy going around. So every 2 levels, you have brand new gear just tailored to your class given to you.
Right.
So
right.
you might have, why are you going to pass up a sword that's way better in DPS just because you can't use one ability?
Yep.
So you might hang on to that dagger that's 5 levels below just so you could,
use the backstab.
Use backstab every so often.
Yep. Cool. So next we have Shadowfall. Descend from above on your enemy, inflicting very high damage with a guaranteed critical strike. Shadowfall is only usable out of combat. Requires Shadow Walk or Shadow Dwell. So maybe that would be like you first got to go into hide, then sneak, possibly pilfer, and then back up, use Shadowfall, and then backstab.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you'd have to change those because pilfer is just.
I know, just add that in for flavor.
Yeah, well, that's
take your money while I'm backstabbing you.
Yeah,
I'm already hidden.
Realistically, until you had pilfer at a really high level, usually it would just aggro.
Yeah.
But again, you have to be out. So we already know, like Shadow watching the streams, it's just you can class that anytime you want. You didn't have to hide, then sneak, then Shadow Walk. But yeah, it's definitely it's the it really reminds me of like going back to World of Warcraft, where there was those abilities that were like, oh, you had to be, in stealth, you know what I mean? And then it was, you would just come out of you would come out of stealth, and then what the hell was it? Ambush? That was the one I was thinking of.
Yes.
Because of ambush, and it was like crazy damage.
Ambush and blade twist, I think it was.
Yeah. So it's like, and it's nice to see them, because backstab was one of those ones that was just behind. It didn't have to be in this. So it's nice to see that them kind of pulling potential abilities from other areas that aren't necessarily just EverQuest. Again, there could be something similar that was in EverQuest, but I didn't play a rogue. I wasn't 100% familiar, but I'm
not trying to hate on the rogues, but I cannot stand that. That's it. Rogues, they sound cool, and they always look cool for sure. But and again, I'm not trying to hate on them, but I hate them. They're one class that I hate. They're always in the shadows. Especially if we choose to play on a PvP server, it's like you're walking around just not knowing where the rogues are because they're always hidden. They just want to get up on you,
I think that's of a WoW mentality.
Okay.
Because WoW, like, granted, yes, if they were in combat, but they had so many abilities to get them out of combat and then go back invisible.
Yeah.
And EverQuest. Yeah, well, the chain stuns. Again, in EverQuest, you weren't getting chain stunned by a rogue. They didn't have chain stuns. Granted, they could hide and sneak in combat. But again, we've talked about this before, and I'm kind of curious to how they're going to handle this, was that eventually everybody got C and Biz.
Yeah.
So good luck hiding and sneaking as a rogue.
Yeah,
because all it did was put your name in brackets, and guess what? I can still see you. So the rogue really relied on, like, he had to try to circle around you a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I could be speaking out of turn, but to me, I wasn't really playing as a Shadow Knight. I didn't fear rogues in PvP.
Yeah.
Because again, I had the darkness line. It's like, okay, now I'm gonna slow you. You know, hopefully it lands because it's based on resists and stuff. But again, it wasn't one of those deals. Again, you know, we'll have to see what happens. But again, you know, I have more positive feelings. I hope that they'll do a good thing and not really. You probably won't end up having the giant gank fest that was the rogues before. It was just, you know, stealth and, you know, stealth this, stealth that, stealth this, stun, you know, so.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Moving on to the alchemical abilities. We have Smoke and Mirrors. An instant cast with a 30-second cooldown. Smash a vial at the feet of your enemy, releasing caustic smoke into their eyes and nose and incapacitating them for up to 24 seconds. Any damage will break the effect. We've seen this ability in the streams on I can't remember the name of the captain's name, but it was in the Black Rose Keep, I believe it was, where they used Smoke and Mirrors at beta for PAX.
Oh yeah, it's the lady. Where was it? Where I was talking about how what is it? Because I said it's I think they're saying Theon, right?
Yes,
Theon.
yes.
And I said, well, in Irish, it's just Finn. It's just pronounced Finn.
There you go, Rob, dropping some knowledge.
It's not Theon. It just be pronounced Finn. Again, it was kind of. It kind of goes to like the Camelot Unchained, where they're saying Tuatha, and it's again, I'm not proficient in Gaelic. I just like the language, but it's like Tuatha. It's pronounced like Tuatha. It's not Tuatha. You know, Gaelic's one of those languages, or Irish is one of those languages where it's not pronounced how it looks, and to an English speaker, you're like, this doesn't even make sense.
You hear that, Visionary Realms? Rob said it right here.
Yeah, but again, it's their game, it's their character, it's their world.
It's their baby.
Irish does not exist in Terminus, so it's
we'll
beyond.
call it what we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Okay, so we have Flash Bomb. Throw a flash bomb at your feet, immediately ending combat. This ability automatically activates Shadow Walk or Shadow Dwell. Here we go.
So yeah, that's their vanish. But again, I don't have a problem with that. You know, as in, we don't know what a cooldown is. We don't know how long it's going to be. It's probably not something that the rogue's going to constantly be in and out and this and that.
Right.
You know, again, I could also see them. They've already mentioned that they're going to have abilities be separate. So when they balance abilities, they're going to balance them for PvP, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll affect the PvE. So that's how EverQuest was. You could fear mobs in EverQuest, but you couldn't fear players. So there was just abilities that did not work. Mm-hmm. So you might have certain abilities that they say like, nope, this ability is not going to work on PCs, you know. Or if you cast it like Shadowfall, it says inflicting very high damage. So who knows what that means? Yeah. But if it's something that's going to do like 200 damage to a mob, I could see it doing like, you know, 175 to a PC, because they would, you know, say it's only going to do 75% of the output. Right. So again, they have the ability to tweak those things, which is nice. And again, so you're not making people angry, because it's primarily a PvE game.
Right.
So as a PvP player, I understand that you shouldn't break an ability on PvE just because it's overpowered in PvP.
Right.
But it is nice that they can be separate,
right.
so that
Flexible.
then they're not affecting. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Okay. Next ability, Sleeping Powder. Blow a cloud of sleeping powder into the air. The rogue and all enemies caught in the cloud will be put to sleep for up to 24 seconds. Any damage will break the effect. Now, that's interesting because they're including the rogue with the enemies. That's pretty cool. I mean, and it makes sense. Like if you, it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. I mean, you think they're a rogue. Okay, so the rogue is a class. They are the masters of subterfuge. You'd think that they'd have some type of, what's the word?
Immunity.
Yes, an immunity to their own stuff. You know what I mean? But it's cool. I like it. That means they got to watch out too.
Yeah, they got to develop that resistance to iocane powder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, they
can't drink the Kool-Aid.
It's a powerful AOE. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like I understand that there's got to be a counter to it, which is nice. Again, it's like the rogue. It's again that this is like, to me, an ultimate panic button. Like, oh man, we pulled too many people.
Right.
So the rogue just says, okay, I'll sacrifice myself for the 24 seconds. You lose my DPS, but hopefully in that time period you can get a few, get like one of these guys down.
Right.
And then, the rogue comes back, and then you use smoke and mirrors to mez one of them.
Right.
So hopefully, it's cool. It's a cool ability. To me, it's kind of unique. I haven't really seen an ability that's similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. It's kind of, it adds newness to the game.
Yeah,
You're not just borrowing everything from anybody else.
Right. Yep. All right. We have a pressurized flask. Throw a sealed flask of pressurized air at target location. The flask shatters on impact, creating a loud noise that draws the attention of nearby enemies for a short time. It sounds just like an AOE taunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, like sacrificing yourself, sacrificing
it's
the
like,
DPS shortly.
Yeah, because it's like, oh man, that guy is on the healer, and we need to get him off the healer. So, again, because you could tie it in, because you pull the mob, run away, cast, I say cast, but I don't know what it is. Could be instant. Throw flash bomb, which then takes you out of combat and makes you invisible. So then that might give enough time for whoever else to take aggro back from that mob, so you could develop your own tactics accordingly. But again, it kind of ties into, like, if you were up the top, the role of the rogue is DPS, but it also says utility. So some of this is the utility. The utility is kind of the crowd control aspect, and then crowd control doesn't necessarily mean it has to be rooted or mezzed. Sometimes it's just, like you said, using that taunt-like ability, and if you you've cleared a tunnel in a dungeon, you're just like, I'm just going to get aggro and run back that way for a while.
Yep.
And that's just enough form of crowd control to take him away.
Interesting. So our next one, we've talked for a little bit about this ability offline, unstable mixture, and it's unknown right now whether or not this is a flavor ability, and if it is, it could be one of the first. In this ability, again, unstable mixture. Throw a vial of hastily combined ingredients at your enemy, causing an unpredictable effect. And I think that this could be taken in multiple ways and in different directions. One being a flavor ability where it's just kind of, you know, a fun thing to do, or it truly is a rogue ability, a rogue's alchemical ability, where it's just like, you know, hey, it's the last thing on my menu bar that doesn't have a cooldown, and I'm just gonna pop it in there and see what happens with if the fight's going pretty well. You know.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if, like, you know, it says unpredictable, but in a sense, there's going to be a table that it pulls from.
Yeah.
So it could be something always detrimental, because I hate to see them say, like, oh, this is going to give a speed buff to the mob, because then why would you ever use it? If there's a chance that it's going to be harmful to the group, then why would you ever use it? I could see, like, it either has a chance of being a DOT or a direct damage or some sort of debuff, because then you're just like, fine, as long as it's something negative, I'll just throw it in there.
Right.
But again, you know, we kind of say flavor as in, sometimes there was some ability that you just might use because they're fun to use. Like, again, kind of going back to, not everything has to be a min-max. You know, I really hope that not everything has to be a min-max. Hopefully there's just some abilities you use because, hey man, this ability is just fun. Like Unstable Mixture, I throw it at the mob and for some reason he turns into a frog. For no other reason other than it's just a frog. You know, or turns him into a skeleton. Just, you know, it could be just something stupid and visual. You know, sometimes that stuff is fun.
Right.
Or maybe it does have a thing that's going to decrease his strength and it turns him into something, you know, weaker in a sense, like a frog.
Yep.
But who knows? But again, we'll have to see where it goes.
Interesting. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. Rob and I, we really appreciate it. We've worked really hard on the information that we've gotten thus far. And again, we are in no way, shape, or form affiliated with Visionary Realms. We are just doing this as two fans on our spare time, and we just like to do it, you know. And again, please comment, thumbs up, thumbs down. I love the good with the bad. Let us know how we can improve. Let us know what we're missing. Let us know what information, if we can get it, would you like to have. Maybe a chance to talk with the developers of Visionary Realms. Something. I don't know. Let us know. And Rob, it's always great having these talks with you. I certainly appreciate you joining the stream. And so again, thank you for coming out, taking your free time. All right, guys. So again, thank you very much. I'm Twism Family. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Twism Family, Twitter at Twism Family. Rob, do you have any plugs you want to put out there?
Sure. I don't really use Twitter much, but I'm at RJ Cassidy V. Is that what I am? I can't remember. What I am. Oh, shows how much I use it. Here, give me a second. Update. No, I am at Robert J. Cassidy V on Twitter. So, if I do updates to the Pantheon spell book and ability book that you hear, usually I send them out through that Twitter. I try to tag Pantheon and stuff, so that way hopefully it gets sent out.
I'm always forgetful. I'm so bad at that stuff.
Yeah. The only one thing I'll add too is that you might have noticed at the bottom of the spell book, if you notice it, is there's a thing I put in for universal abilities, which has bandage and fishing. We've only kind of seen those in a couple. We've seen bandage in one thing, and we've seen fishing in another spell book. I just kind of threw those universal because my experience in EverQuest, everybody had access to bandage, everybody had access to fishing, so I just kind of threw those in there just as flavor for every particular class. If that changes, we'll update it, but just in case somebody says, hey, you guys did your stream, I noticed there was bandage and fishing and you didn't talk about it's just generic.
For shame.
There's just generic abilities that are probably going to be universal across classes, and bandage and fishing were ones that were universal. So I just plopped them in there.
Cool. Thank you. All right, guys, take care. We shall talk in the future, come up with more class discussions, and we'll see you next time. See ya.